Good day, y'all. We're walking through the swamps of Lake Monroe again. It's winter. It's January 20th, 2025. We just had the coldest 2 days of the season, and everything is in its full winter mode, but spring is coming back, and we'll see signs of life coming back to the swamp. Let's take a little walk and see what we can see. And we're basically right now walking through what I guess you would call a cabbage palm oak hammock. We're probably about 50 yards away from the actual shore of Lake Monroe. And just beyond these palms you can see kind of the line of cypress trees, which would demarcate the actual former shoreline of the lake. See up in the canopy the red leaves are mostly red maples, and they're flowering now. You can see some of the fruits of the red maple. They're winged. These are called, I believe, a samara, and they're like little helicopters. They kind of fly down to the ground, truly in the cypress now. And you can see all the Spanish moss, bare trees, and if we look we can see the high tide line of the highest lake water level, and this is about 4 feet off the ground. So at one time it would be standing neck deep in water, waist, up to my chest. Light is able to get in here now, and this will aid in the germination of some of the trees. But this stuff layer has got to be about 3 inches thick, 2 to 3 inches thick, and keeps the soil very moist, and it's full of basically like unbroken down organic matter, and very rich. The water level is very close to the surface here. Years ago they built a road that basically blocks the flow of water from the lake to this swamp, and there's a couple areas where water from the lake is allowed to flow through, and this acts as kind of like a buffer, but it's largely deprived of its water flow, and had that bridge or that road not be blocking, we probably would have some standing water back here, a couple feet on the ground. So let's just keep walking. I don't see any signs of spring, but we'll keep looking. This is the fruit of the cypress tree, and these break up into little individual seed nuggets and will germinate when it's warm enough. Actual seed here, and it looks like this. Here's one of the seeds. And this is the seed. It's a cypress seed, Taxodium distichum. One of the things I really like to think about when I'm in a relatively untouched piece of swamp or woods like this is to kind of think about all the people that dwelled here for thousands of years. And I'm not talking about Europeans, I'm talking about Native Americans. Lake Monroe has signs of habitation that easily go back 5,000 or 6,000 years. And I'm sure somewhere in the middle of the lake there may be signs of even older habitations. But in the shadow of a doubt, this area was utilized by Native peoples here in Florida for thousands of years. 10, maybe 15,000 years is not out of the realm of possibility at this point. And it's just really interesting as I walk here to put myself in their shoes and think about, what they saw and how they felt towards the land. Sure, attitudes have changed. But when you walk through the swamp, you know, you never know what you're going to find. And over here, you know, see a truck tire. That's what Europeans have brought us here. Now this stuff floats in on from the lake when it rains really heavily. But there were also settlers here, and I found turpentine pots out here. So this was actually an area that was used as part of the turpentine industry. Most of the slash pines are going to be that way. The shore is that way. So there were probably a lot more pines here at one time. I don't see that many. They mostly have an overstory here of live oak, swamp laurel oak, cabbage palm, elm trees, American elm, cypress. It's not very diverse, as I said, but peaceful. Let's see what we got over here. I find interesting garbage out here. You never know what kind of interesting garbage you're gonna find. Here's a panel from somebody's car. Here's a Coca-Cola can. Here's a piece of electrical conduit tubing, probably. Here we have another can. Old one, Schlitz. The old pop top. That's probably 50 or 75 years old. Maybe a Bud Light. Now we're starting to see signs of spring. I think this is mostly southern dewberry growing in here. And this is a member of the blackberry family. And this constitutes bear food, basically. Black bears eat this in the spring. And we also have Pennsylvania blackberry here. Spring. First signs of spring. The dewberries. So here's one of the things I find these fairly infrequently here, but this is a Hurdy cup, and this is evidence of turpentine industry that was here along Lake Monroe. And these pots were made in Jacksonville around the turn of the century, around the 1900s, and they were basically affixed to pine trees, slash pine trees, and they're supposed to make it safer for the trees. And what they would do is they would take a big old slash pine like this, and they would cut cat faces into it with an axe or a machete or a saw. They basically scar the bark. They would hang this up, and they would hang a little metal drain on it, like a little guide for the resin. And this thing would collect all the turpentine resin or the pine tree resin. And then they would come back after a week or two or more, collect all the pots and dump them into barrels and haul them out with ox carts. After the turpentine industry kind of went out of stock, or went out of business, like the 20s, by the 20s, so these cups were no longer in use. But really interesting, a little bit of history here, and I found some of these intact with pine resin in them, still 100-year-old pine resin. So interesting part of the turpentine industry, and a big reason that Florida and indeed North America was colonized through the turpentine and the pine tree industry. So interesting bit of history here. All right, well, now I'm kind of deep in the cabbage palm oak forest here. And the canopy is mostly swamp laurel oaks. Swamp laurel oaks have a bark that is a little smoother than Virginia oak. Virginia oak has really deeply furrowed bark like this. When I find a laurel oak, I'll have a look at the bark. it's a little bit less steeply furrowed. But over here we see a air plant that fell. And there isn't very much diversity of air plants in this part of Florida because they're mostly tropical and subtropical, but this one is one of the earliest discovered ones by William Bartram, an early explorer, American naturalist, one of the first American naturalists. And this is Tillandsia bartrami, and you can see the flowering stalk here getting ready to come up. And it's not a super showy flower. It's got these grassy leaves, and they usually you see them in bundles and masses. But this is one of the earliest identified Tillandsias in Florida, and it's definitely one of the most cold tolerant ones. So easily surviving freezing temperatures for several days. Tillandsia bartrami, named after William Bartram. This will last forever. This is a landmark for the human that threw it here. This will be here probably till the end of time. And I'm too far away from a garbage bag to be able to take this out. And this is one of the artifacts of our modern culture, Gatorade. So in the swamp we have interesting microhabitats that occur basically on a lot of the trees. We have other plants living on them, and they're called epiphytes. And one of the more common epiphytes that you'll find in the swamp is these shoestring ferns growing from the old residual leaf bases of the cabbage palm tree. And these ferns take advantage of this very spongy, damp environment. When it rains, these areas will hold moisture for days, and that's enough for these ferns to live. And also we have some mosses growing in here. Probably poison ivy vine too, and grapevine growing up the side. Another epiphyte that you see in the fern family are the golden polypody or cabbage palm fern. I see this is a frond of the golden polypody, but you can see them growing at the bases of those cabbage palms that haven't been exposed to fire. There's some over here too. You can see those ferns growing. Let me get a little closer. You can see the ferns. They're right over here. A lot of diversity here, and not a lot of different species of ferns here either. Let's keep looking. Right. So I was walking along and I saw this mushroom, and this is a member of the Lacaria genus. These are important mycorrhizal symbionts with the trees here, mostly the pines. And you can see there's a mixture of, you have sweet gum trees growing in the area, and slash pine. And these are also known as deceivers. I'm not sure why they call them that, but these are important. The mycorrhizal base of this fungus grows in amongst the roots of the tree, and it allows the tree to get nutrients that it wouldn't otherwise acquire without the presence of this mycorrhizae that makes it available. There's another swamp laurel oak here. They form nice buttressed roots too. I don't know. See the buttressing of that root. Similar to an American elm. It stabilizes it. You can see the roots stay close to the surface for oxygenation. That keeps them from smothering when it's full of water. I'll keep looking, see what we see. Much wetter over here, as you can see. We've got standing water here. And that's probably because the access from the lake is probably near here. So when the water overflows, or the wind pushes it, it can push it in here. But you can see some pool of water. Some Spanish moss growing. Nice panoramic view. Red maple. Beautiful red maple. It gets cold, they turn especially red. As the chlorophyll dies, leaves behind anthocyanins and other pigments, carotenoids, responsible for that red coloration. This is a truly massive swamp laurel oak right here. I mean, look at the trunk on that thing. Talk about buttressing. This thing is huge. And look at that bark. That's your swamp laurel bark. Swamp laurel oak. Not deeply furrowed, flat mostly. But look at the buttressing on these roots. Wow. They go out in every direction. This tree is a survivor. Because look, it's surrounded by all these other dead trees that got knocked down. But that buttressing keeps it from getting knocked down. That buttressing keeps it from blowing over. It's Quercus laurifolia. Swamp laurel oak. It's a survivor. This tree with the peely kind of bark. Kind of flat, buttressed, most likely an American elm. Very common component here. Here's a little sign of spring here, I guess. This toothed midsorus fern. It's a common fern of swampy areas, edges. Swampy areas. One of my favorite things about the Florida swamps are when you find massive old oaks growing out in the middle of nowhere. And you take a look at the branches of those. You can see all the resurrection ferns growing on there. And also air plants. There's lots of tillandsia, bartramii on there. And I don't think pictures really do this justice. But if you look at this trunk on this, it's probably it's probably a live oak. You look on the trunk of this live oak, the heavily furrowed bark is looking. Look at it. Look at it compared to my foot. I'm in a little bit more of an upland situation here now, moving away from the swampy part of the swamp. You got lots of cabbage, palm, and the understory. This is saw palmetto, Serenoa repens. Lots of cabbage palm. The oak here, it starts to replace the swamp laurel oak, is the water oak or black oak. And it's also very flood tolerant, but I guess not as much as the swamp laurel oak. It's also known as a post oak because it tends to grow really tall and straight and useful for posts. Here we have a nice sweet gum tree here. Liquid amber. It's the genus, source of incense. And so here you can see the typical leaves of the black oak. This is the shape. Now not every leaf has that shape, this club-shaped leaf. You can see some of the leaves don't. Some of them superficially resemble a laurel oak. But if you look at enough of the leaves, and you see that very deeply lobed, roughly teardrop shaped oak leaf, and you have yourself a black oak, Quercus nigra, also known as the black water oak, post oak. And it's, it's a very, not usually very big oak or magnificent oak, and tends to rot. Not be a really good one to plant around the house. But interesting diversity of oaks in Florida that occupy virtually every niche you can think of. Here you can see the resurrection fern closer up. Pleiopeltis polypodioides. And of course, this fern can dry out completely. It looks dead, and given the right humidity and moisture, it will come back. We've had some rain, so it's looking rather spry. And it grows all up. You see this tall post oak or swamp oak. Just tall and straight these trees grow. Not very big usually. You get some, usually they all grow out of like a central area and just form these kind of thin, they can be tall, but they usually don't get very fat. Here we can see the leaves of the swamp laurel oak, and you can see they're linear, smooth, green, both sides, and they're usually consistently shaped like this, which describes a laurel leaf. So much like a bay laurel. With this swamp laurel oak, the leaves can be smaller, but they're almost always this shape. Sometimes they're a little bit more elongated. They're very rarely lobed. You have a couple mutants or curled leaves, but for the most part, they're all going to have this smooth margins. So occasionally you'll see them with a little bit of toothing. This is camphor tree. This is an invasive tree in Asia that grows here. I mean, it's a fairly nice looking tree to grow. It's a weedy tree. You can see the bark. You can take this tree. But it grows in a lot of native habitats. It's becoming a real problem down here. Camphor tree. It smells good when you cut it down. Here's another one of the Tillandsia, a common one here. Yeah, it can even be a little bit of a nuisance. Tillandsia recurvata, or ball moss. Not a moss, more like a pineapple plant. Very unshowy flowers. Hairy, pubescent leaves to minimize water loss and reflect sunlight. Very well adapted for living here. It can withstand freezing temperatures. We get here periodically. You can see some more camphor tree here, taking over the pines. This used to be pine flatwood territory here. Look at this old dead post oak. You can see even when it's dead how much life depends on it by these woodpecker holes. Here we've got some, this is what the bear poop looks like. It's got lots of saw palmetto berries. This is actually cabbage palm berries. And there's quite a lot of it here. Got some more of it here. That's what I call starvation food for bears, because most of it's undigested. Only the seed coat is really retained. black bear scat. And we're not very far from an urban area, so these bears are really close. And it's fresh. Important habitat. This is an important corridor for the bears. This is the blackberry vines, and this is basically, this whole field is full of them. You couldn't walk very far through this, you would be ripped to shreds. And these are nasty plants full of hooked. How the bears eat around this, I don't know. They have very nimble lips, but this is a really big area of blackberry vines. And this is either Pennsylvania blackberry or southern dewberry. There are other blackberry vines here, but those are the two common ones. I'm not about to take these apart and trying to figure out which is which. This is a huge field. You can see them here too, these darker plants. We had some cold, so it makes their leaves a little darker for a while. All blackberry vines. Like this part of the lake is surrounded by blackberry vine fields. It's very attractive for wildlife. This whole dead looking area is a grapevine thicket. It's got a lot of blackberry vines in there too. It's basically a produce section of the bears market. And we're in the winter stage, so it's all kind of dormant, but it'll be coming back soon. And they're hanging around waiting. You can see by the scat we found. All right, well, we're heading back to civilization. Have a good day, y'all.